Hi, my name is Rebekah Hardy, and I am the campus minister here at Rowan University in Glassboro, New Jersey. Today we're talking about the 3 pillars of Lent, and those pillars are prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Now, I think that when things have kind of old language assigned to them, that we might think to ourselves like, oh, I don't even know what that means. It must just be something outdated. It must be something that doesn't pertain to me. I don't even know what the heck an alm is. So if I have one, obviously I'll give it away. You can have it. It sounds pretty gross, right? So I think we need to come to a better understanding of what we're talking about here, first off. So we're talking about pillars, and what is a pillar? A pillar is something that lifts something else up off the ground and it holds it suspended in the air. So it's a support structure that lifts something else up off of the ground. When we're talking about Lent, that something is us. It's our church. So prayer, fasting, almsgiving, these 3 things are the support structures and the lifting force behind our Lent. Now, when we talk about prayer, I think something important to get across, an important message for us to understand, is that prayer is a conversation. That prayer is part of our relationship with God. It's the communication part. So think about your friends, your family. How do you communicate with those that you love? Do you spend time with them, to the point where you can even be comfortable with them in silence? Do you text them a lot? Do you call them? Do you talk to their family members? These are great questions because this can help us to see, okay, how can I grow in my relationship with God? Well, okay, so the people I'm closest with, I tend to text them a lot. I like to send them funny memes. I love to share my life with them. And we can apply this to God because with God, as with any of our humans that we surround ourselves with, we have a relationship. And that relationship is carried on and deepened by communication, by us sharing ourselves with the person on the other end of the relationship. And that's what prayer is. Prayer isn't just, I memorized all these words in a row and I'm going to say them out loud. And, even if I don't mean what I'm saying, I'm still going to say them and then I'll feel better. Prayer is that opportunity to say hey, I miss you. This is how my day's going. This is what I've been thinking about or struggling with. And this is what we need to do with God. So examining the relationships in your lives, the people that you're closest to, how do you communicate with them? And how can you use that to deepen your relationship with God? Or maybe it's that you don't communicate enough. Maybe it's that you do need to take extra time in the day to set aside and say, hey, God, this is my day. At the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day, whenever, anytime, you can approach God. But for Lent, you can build this into your schedule. Maybe it's that you don't spend enough quiet time with God. Maybe you need to incorporate Eucharistic adoration. Maybe you don't share your actual life with God. Maybe you're not honest with God. So maybe, you need to go to confession regularly, or maybe you need to set that time aside to just tell him about your life, tell him about your struggles, tell him about anything, everything. And you'll notice that this deepens your relationship with God. It will also transform your love for him. Because as we show that we are invested in something, it changes our hearts and it'll show us oh, my relationship with God is important to me because I set aside this time so that I can talk to him, so that I can just spend time listening to him, so that I can read his word in the scriptures. So moving on to fasting, and this is something that is pretty wide reaching. Okay, so we talk about fasting and abstinence. So abstinence is, this language that we use when we're talking about Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. We abstain from meat. And also the Fridays during Lent, we do not eat meat. That's a sacrifice that we make as a church. And fasting, we explain this by, you eat 1 full meal in a day and 2 smaller meals that put together wouldn't equal the regular size meal that you eat. So it's withholding something that is good for us or something that we would typically have. So food is good for us. Food is something that, obviously we need to survive. And by fasting, we remind our bodies that our soul is in control. We are not governed by our desire for food. And maybe you might be thinking like, okay, I don't have a tendency to overeat, like why would I give myself less food? And this is a good question, but fasting trains our mind to be in sync with our soul. So when you know that there's something that your body wants and you say, hold on, like I will give that to you, but we're going to pray, and it's going to be less than usual because my soul is in control, and this isn't just for food. This reaches into the other areas of our lives, maybe where we struggle with sin, where we feel like our passions take over or our desires. And, we feel like our soul is like not really in the driver's seat. We do things that we don't want to do. We indulge ourselves in ways that, we probably shouldn't. So fasting helps us to regain control over our bodies and over our desires, over our passions. And abstinence, is just, we give up meat because of these symbolic days in our church as an added on sacrifice. But with fasting abstinence, we are also called during Lent to potentially give up something that's coming in the way of our relationship with God. So when we examine our lives and we see, okay, maybe it's that I spend too much time on social media. Maybe I care too much about what people think because I'm constantly looking at their opinions, or maybe I'm constantly comparing myself, or I use it to trash talk or whatever is coming in the way of my relationship with God. This is something that takes up more of my time than my relationship with God. Then it might be the time to say, okay, for Lent, I'm giving up social media, or I'm going to give up, this amount of time that I would usually spend on it. Maybe I'm not going to look on social media before bedtime. Maybe when I lay in bed, I'm just going to pray. Whatever that sacrifice you feel that God is calling you to, in order to improve your relationship with him, you also fast from that during Lent. And last but not least, we have my favorite one, almsgiving. So almsgiving is essentially giving of your time, your talent, your treasure to those who are in need. So typically what this looks like is giving money to the poor. Let's say you don't have a job, you don't have a way of income. This would look more like giving of your time and giving of your talents to those who are in need of it. And just think now, we are more lonely than ever. We're more isolated than ever. Now is the time to show people that you care about them, to give them your attention, to give them your time. I pray that all of this has helped you in some way to better understand these 3 pillars of Lent, and I pray that you have the best Lent ever. God bless.